I've spent many years meditating, singing kirtan and such things, and I always knew that there's just more to enlightenment than that, and I'm really grateful to actually hear teachers express that. And I'm just kind of curious what kind of role you view like meditation, like what role it has in everything. And
how long have you practiced meditation?
About 10 years.
Really? That's pretty good. So you
started
when you were a fetus? Have you found it useful?
Yeah, it's definitely supported me a lot in my own life, but I don't see as much, like, I'm really drawn to supporting others, like the situation that the world is in and helping that, and I don't see how me sitting and being at peace really does much for that. And I just know that there's more I need to be doing. And
okay, I'll give you a bit of sophistry first. Sophistry meaning spacious logic that has no meaning. And so I'll try to do that first. There's developmental psychologists have looked at scales of development for decades, literally, because once you start getting onto that, one of the first things you want to know is how can we help adults move through these stages? It's sort of a natural inclination. Lawrence Kohlberg spent 20 years of his life trying to do that. Carol Gilligan did. Kurt Fischer, Robert Keegan, Howard Gardner. And interestingly, there's only one thing that's been consistently demonstrated to move people an average of about 2 stages, and that's meditation. So that's point number one. Point number two, Amartya Sen, the great Nobel Prize-winning economist, demonstrated that there's never been a famine in democratic countries. And the reason is because of information flow can allocate resources wherever they're necessary. Item number 3, a democracy stems from at least stage 5 moral development. Since 70% of the world's population is not at that, then the single greatest thing you can do to end world famine is to meditate. Meditation has a profound impact on the average level of consciousness in the world. And so that's what's very, very, very important. So I think go ahead and spend time meditating. That's exactly something that you should be doing. Why does it work? This is, again, a little bit technical, but there's a fundamental rule about development, and that's the subject of one stage becomes the object of the subject of the next stage. So what happens when you meditate, and this is probably why meditation has been demonstrated to move people through stages, is basically you're looking at your own mind. You're taking time, you're relaxing, you're settling into yourself. You don't necessarily have to be introspecting. You could just be resting with everything that's arising, let everything arise just as it is, and self-liberate in its own space. But when you do that, you're still making it an object. And when you make it an object, the only thing that can't be made an object is I, or the pure witness, or God. So meditation is a way basically to help you disidentify with finite objects and rest in that ground of being, which is your very nature, your very self. So that, again, a little bit abstract summaries of that, but I think it's extremely important, and don't ever let anybody tell you that it's just, not having any impact on the world. You're changing the fundamental fabric of the cosmos when you meditate. Okay, great.
First of all, if someone really understands what meditation is that it's not a physical posture, but it's a posture in relationship to life, or it's a non-relative relationship to all experience. So the posture of meditation is have no relationship to your experience, right? It's the only time where anybody would consciously choose to have no relationship to their experience. Now,
and not identify with it.
Right, not identify with it. But what's important to understand is that the meditative posture of no relationship is a non-relative or absolute position, because meditation is it's an experience, but it's also it's a perspective, and it's a posture. And often the problem is a lot of people who do meditate don't really ever contemplate the implications of what it means to take that position in relationship to their experience. Now, if someone really knows what they're doing when they're meditating, first of all, the experience that they're going to have will remove any doubts about why they're doing it. Okay? If someone actually knows what they're doing, what they're going to experience will be so profoundly liberating from anything that's ever happened every single time right? Always being ever new, always being ever new. That because what happens is the meditative posture releases you from the world stream. It releases you from being trapped in the universe or being trapped in time. And one of the questions is, how many times does any of us need to have that experience of ecstatic freedom from being trapped to be convinced? And if we are really interested in higher development, then it's more than essential. It's absolutely foundational, no matter what, that the individual truly become, that the essence of who they are, that the personalities, that the foundation of the personality, the self-sense is grounded in that kind of absolute conviction. Now, the honest thing is, a lot of people meditate without having discovered that conviction, and that's why they begin to doubt about whether they should be doing it or not. Now, ultimately, when the conviction is discovered based on real experience, meditation, it becomes something a lot more than just sitting in a particular posture for a particular period of time, but it becomes your ultimate refuge in relationship to life itself at all times, in all places, through all circumstances. That's where you truly abide and are ultimately always coming from if you're truly free. Okay? So the issue of meditation, you see, it's something we need to do, and it's also something we need to think about. Of course, meditation is not the time to do it. Because the implications are always, and it's because, once again, the position you're taking isn't relative. And you can't say that about many things in life, if anything else. You see what I'm saying?
Just God.
Right. No, but once you find the answer to that question, and this is what I'm interested in, is what's the non-relative or absolute relationship to life? Now that's a real dicey question, dangerous question. But then in an evolutionary context, in a spiritual and truly evolutionary context, what is an absolute relationship to life? Or what is a more, even though it doesn't really make sense to put it, what is a more absolute relationship to life? And these are all the questions that come into it. So there's a lot more to it than just the kind of the sitting still or practicing. Unfortunately, a lot of people practice meditation, but most of the time they get into a rut without even knowing it. Because when this thing is really alive, you see, it's like anything else that you do. When you're the reason it's not the meditation that's the issue. It has to do with the level of engagement of the individual who's doing it. So even if you look at many traditions, maybe the founder of the tradition, the vehicle for their liberation was some kind of meditative path, if that was the case, and then you find maybe they have thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers, and very few seem to have the same experience. I don't think it was necessarily anything wrong with the particular method, because most methods are pretty good if they're real. But I ultimately think it has to do with the passion or the intention of the individual who's doing it, how much they really want to be free and how much they really care about it.
It also has to be surrounded by ethics. The traditional three pillars are always sila, jnana, prajna. In other words, ethical behavior, then meditation, and then non-dual awareness. And in America in particular, part of the Dharma bum kind of approach is people want to get into, well, I can just get into non-conceptual, absolute mind and do whatever I want. Love and do as you will. It's sort of the standard thing there. And then that's simply not true. At a fundamental level, it's true. But at a more fundamental level, it's not. You arise, and it's the combination of your wisdom, which is your capacity to understand absolute emptiness, or Godhead, or I-N, or the abyss, and then your capacity to do the right thing in the world of form. And both of these have to rise together. And the union of emptiness and form is the union of absolute and ethics in the world of form. So really, an ethical foundation is always stressed. And in some traditions, actually stress training compassion before you get into deep meditation, because once you get a hit of big mind, where everything is right, then then there's no reason to practice ethics unless you learned it on the way up. But Charles Manson had a motto: if everything is one, nothing is wrong. Okay, so that's what's wrong with that path.
Also, it makes sense that the more we evolve and develop ourselves, the more we see and the more we know, the more responsible we have to be willing to be as individuals. So in other words, the moral bar is raised for us as individuals because we have seen more right? Deeper, higher, you see? So therefore, what we do, how we are, who we really are, this has to do with our moral development and what our ethical and moral relationships with the world and to life actually is, begins on a certain level to count far more than whatever our meditative or spiritual attainments may or may not be.
And we talked about that in the last group handed
Yeah.
discussion. Because the idea we were using Immanuel Kant, a lot of you know, said that basically he was looking for what's the foundation of ethics. And he said, behave as if the maxim governing your behavior were to be a universal rule for all rational people. It's sort of a bit of a variation on do unto others as you would have them do unto you and so on. Basically it's a way to have universal fairness. But right now we're saying that if these structures are actually getting laid down evolutionarily, if they're not given, if the great chain is not given in some fixed, eternal, platonic form, and it's not, but that means that you're doing that. Your behavior, to the extent that you actually live up to your highest, you are actually creating structures that future humanity will inhabit. And I can't think of anything more galvanizing in terms of getting yourself ethically straight than that. Because it's not just act as if the maxim governing your behavior is going to. It is creating a morphogenetic field. It's not as if, it's is. Therefore, choose your acts very, very, very carefully. And make sure that the next act that you do comes from your highest self. Make sure the next thing that comes out of your mouth comes from your very highest self. And under those circumstances, there's hope for the future. But that structures being laid down is God laying them down. It's Spirit laying them down through us. There's nothing else. So we have to become appropriate vehicles for Spirit laying down the very structures that humanity is going to inhabit. And if we don't do that, then that is a guilt that we will carry with us for eternity, if that's possible. So choose very, very, very carefully.